Hey everyone, welcome to another ACD. This is Asteria hosting today. We're going to be talking about the latest chapter of The Wandering Inn, chapter 10.19E. E being for the original usage of the letter Emperor Lakan, not Erin, as I think many readers were expecting, especially after recent chapters with her and her goblin friend and some frailings. But no, today we are circling all the way back to some characters we haven't seen or really been with in quite a few volumes, at least in a mainstream sense. Today's chapter is all about witches and Lakan and Doreen. So we're going to start out with some general impressions about this chapter before we start digging into some of the discussion questions and topics that people have come up with. So as people kind of gather their responses, I'll call on our first person, Ready Quill. What were your thoughts?
So, as it was said before the recordings, this was the wholesome relationship chapter, the during sex chapter, the I'm giving up on an adventure because it's too hard chapter, and upending society because I had a bad breakup chapter. I enjoyed it. I thought, like, as I was reading it, that it was too short, and then I saw it was 54,000 words long, one of the longest chapters that's ever been made. And I'm wondering why I feel that way, and I think it's because all the level ups were canceled. So that's my take on the chapter.
I like that take. I think it's a good one. I think quite a few people have said, oh, that felt super short. What the heck? And then when you look at the word count, you're like, no, that took several hours to get through and to read. What's going on? So I think
spent like 3 hours reading this, but why was it so short?
Yeah. So I think that's a really great point, and I think it maybe differs from person to person. But I think the level ups, like you said, are generally also like part of it, but also because maybe like we've got a couple different characters that we're bouncing between, and maybe like it would have been good to stay with one character and then have a second chapter that was slightly more expanded for like Lakan or Doreen or the adventurers or all these different plot lines that were going on in this chapter that we were trying to move forward.
But practically, if you did that, then it would take like 2 or 3 weeks for one interlude, and then it would go back to break again. So we cannot have that. We cannot have that.
Exactly. And so maybe this is where we're starting to see kind of like the new schedule, you know, the strengths, the weaknesses, but the impact that it's kind of slightly having on the story a little bit, where we've got all of these characters and all of these plot lines, and it's just so many. Like if we could have spent an entire month, I think, on Lakan, like in his little hamlet.
Did you think at the beginning of the chapter that it was just Alveca like trying to figure out what her new craft would be, and that would be the whole chapter? Because like I thought for like a hot minute that's what the entire chapter would be.
I thought it was going to morph more into like witches in general and pursuing a lot more of their storylines. And then we kind of did an about face and went with Doreen and Lakan, which I'm not upset about at all because that was amazing. Like that was a fantastic part of the chapter. I just wish we'd had more time with the witches. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that the charm economy is going to be insane for River Farm. I think that it was kind of teased like it'll be a charm powerhouse, a city of magic. We'll see how that affects the wider world. Maybe there'll be a charm against Reinhardt's or a charm against like being a poisonous assholes. Because we already saw Alvica had like a charm against like people being spiteful against her or something. So maybe that'll be the defense against Reinhardt's.
Maybe, or the Reinhardts will be using it. I mean, they're definitely twisty little poisonous. Yes.
Yeah.
I could see them. Yeah, but we'll dig more into that. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Bleach Soul, you're up.
Frankly, I never cared about Doreen and Lake's relationship, but it was great to see Doreen coming out of her shell and become more independent. She just fell in love with the first or whatever. She cared about the first person that ever been shown her any kind of kindness, which is quite sad, to be frank. And you know, the Alvika stuff actually I thought very interesting. How they're researching the the thing. I can't remember what's it. Yeah, and you know, I think it will evolve maybe witchcraft and magic, which will make River Farm very important for. I mean, like uh, like it was said before, very important for magic and charms. So I really like the chapter, even though I didn't care about the relationship between Doreen and Lakin, to be quite frank. That's it.
That's fair enough. Like romance is not for every reader, that is for sure. In fact, it does have a very, very small select following, I think, amongst readers. I'm
Well,
always a sucker for romance. Go ahead.
It's not about the romance part. It's about like I didn't get like this substantive relationship between Lakin and Doreen. It was more like he was nice to her and she just liked him, and he liked her back. It wasn't like I didn't feel there like much depth to explore, or you know, like he told her what to do largely. And you know, it wasn't I don't know, she was like, she is lacking self-worth, self-confidence, and she just always thought like Lakin was right. You know, I just listened to book 12, and you know, everything said wait for Lakin, he does this, he does that. So she didn't have, and they told her, why don't you have your own opinions? And you know, and it's like it wasn't an equal footing relationship, which I thought, all right, so that's why I didn't invest in it. So it wasn't like equal footing. It was like Lakin. He's like the prime guy. He's like the main. He's like the dominant in the relationship, even though he doesn't want to be, because she didn't have any self worth or self confidence. So that's why I wasn't invested in this romance.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that then. Yeah, I would agree with your points that the relationship between Doreen and Lakin started out mostly because, like you said, she, first person that was really kind to her, and it didn't have the moments that were necessary to help continue growing the relationship. And I thought it was like, I love seeing Doreen's character development this chapter. This is something I've been after for like the last time you were with these guys. And I think what a lot of people were frustrated with Doreen is just like you said, she's waiting on Lakin, not really doing anything. And to see her kind of coming into her own and finding herself, it's such a kick-ass moment. And that was really a highlight of this chapter, where she's finally kind of growing into herself, finding her own opinions. I absolutely adored that. Mystical Pie says they definitely enjoyed all the Lakin and Alvika moments of the chapter. They really enjoyed Doreen's character development, especially the part of the chapter that focused on her coming to terms with her weakness as a flaw, as well as re-examining her relationship with Lakin. The part where the Order of the Solstice tackled the rock elementals felt pretty flat to them, though. It's the first time in a while that they felt a chapter was dragging, maybe because they were really enjoying the translation stuff. Overall, a great, much needed chapter. They've always been a lonely proponent of Doreen and Lakin breaking up. Well, I think you won a lot of supporters to your cause, Mystical Pie, by the end of this chapter. Mr. Europe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I very much enjoyed the chapter. I also wasn't super invested in Lakin and Doreen's relationship in particular. I do find it funny that yet another relationship formed in this story has fallen apart. And we're now like half of the big relationships formed with have now fallen apart, with Jalekwa and what's his name, the the Smith guy.
The Smith?
Yeah. They're still going strong, and Relk and Valateresa. Thank you, Mogan. Being the two that are still remaining, and yeah, I noticed that in both of those, the women both experienced terrible tragedies. Maybe that's the key to successful relationship. Who knows? But I especially enjoyed the attention that Doreen and Alevica got. Especially Doreen, since in my opinion, she's just got a bit she was kind of really annoying at the start and through a lot of the time, and then she got really really interesting in volume 6, and after that we never saw her again. Kind of, she was just sidelined for most of the story the moment she got interesting and I started really liking her. So I very much appreciated this chapter.
Oh, absolute highlight of her character was when she punched that Fae. Like,
Yeah.
let's do it. Yeah, so
Just
it was good.
not as much. She what's his name? Introspection, I guess. Not much of her character viewpoint since then, I think. So
Yeah. And, there's still one potential relationship. We have Naren and Nears potentially going strong, depending on if he's realized yet or not.
That's the main relationship of the story. Like, that's what the story is about. It's about Nary and Nears getting married.
I like it. We'll need to commission some celebratory tidings somehow to celebrate the main romance. All right, and then to Mafia Hamster next.
Yes. Where do I start? There are parts of this chapter I really liked, and part of this chapter I just didn't really. I mean, okay, Pirate has a new schedule, so we are getting like one big chapter a week instead of like two very big chapter or medium chapter or whatever. I think the whole start from the chapter could have been cut. I'm not really sure why we even got there. We could have just made it in Doreen and Knights of the Solstice chapter. The whole start really threw me off, and I like Alvika as a character, but when we started this whole thing, I was kinda annoyed. I know Pirate does this often to me, that I'm a bit annoyed at the start of the chapter because we don't following the main plot, and at the end I'm still, oh, that was a good chapter, and they did it again. But I think there could have been some cuts from the start, but I really, really enjoyed the Doreen part. Her POV was awesomely written. I wish Pirate Abba would write a character for Marvel, a strong female character for Marvel. Then that would turn out good. But there were parts of this chapter I really, really was like, why are we even here right now? To be honest.
I think that's fair. I mean, it did feel like two chapters in one. The transition between Elvika to Lakan and jumping around to a few other points of view, like I can see the common narrative throughout the entire chapter, but it would have been nice maybe to have them separated and dig in a little bit more to the witches. But as another reader pointed out, it's hard with the new schedule because otherwise you end up spending an entire month potentially on the Lakan storyline, and a good chunk of readers are wanting to get back more to Aaron and Ryoka and a few other characters that we haven't seen that are kind of maybe feel more like the main plot. I always love forays off into other characters. I think they end up being fantastic. I don't mind not seeing Aaron for a while, but it's a mixed opinion. But I agree with you. Like
I totally agree again. I also like that's why TWI is so because it's so big and so fleshed out, because we know these characters, because we get these solo chapters of those characters. That's why we know Doreen, we know Elvika, we know these characters, not just as side characters. It's just so much about them that every character is so much written that there could be a main character in another show because we have so much about these characters. Because TWI is so large.
It's
And
a weakness and a strength.
correctly. But what I'm getting at is that I wished I could have gotten a fully fledged Knights of the Solstice chapter with Doreen as the side plot maybe,
Mm.
and not just the mix of like 3 different plot points all in one chapter.
So we have seen chapters with multiple plot points before, and it's worked. But maybe this chapter, it was just one too many, especially
Yeah.
when we started with the witches, and we like it set up. I wanted to stay with the witches. Like, don't get me wrong, love the Doreen section. Not the biggest fan of Lakan, but man, I really that start to the chapter when you had the hints of like the magic and the description of the language with the witches and old historical like what witches used to be like I thought we were going to dig into the witch lore. Like that's what I was really going for and excited for, and then we totally did an about face.
And one thing I cracked up, I didn't notice, Lakin, it's not Lakin, it's for everybody who speaks German, for all Germans, it really is Laken. I just died of laughing. Because obviously, as a German, I know his name, but I always pronounced it Laken. But it's really Lark.
We could spend an entire several recordings just going over name pronunciation.
I died laughing when it's really bad sheets. The goddamn Laken. Oh my goodness.
All right, we're going to wrap up general impressions with a few more responses, and then we're going to dig into the first discussion question. So, Mr. Europe says that they like Elvika. It's interesting to see the witch who chose being a little shit as a source of power developing. Also, hag stuff. They think it was important for Lakan to do some important stuff alongside Doreen's story. They think it worked just fine with that. May says overall they are not the biggest fan of the chapter. They never really cared about Lakan and Doreen, as have been stated by several people before, but it's definitely been great to see Doreen finally speaking up for herself. The Order of the Solstice feels like a half-baked squad of adventurers to them, so not really sure what the point of them doing an expedition into a cave is, apart from doing things that the Horns would be doing. Witch's stuff was great, and they are curious about how that specifically would pan out, but they might be slightly biased. Can't say they're too pleased about having this chapter instead of Rabbit Eater, Aaron, Naren, Nears, Sarah, Geneva, or basically any other plot thread that's been set up. More witches, please, heart. And we've got a couple emote agreements with that. I think it's interesting that you say to Sarah, because she's a new character. She's brand new. And that chapter introduced a bunch of new characters, which always has a mixed reception. But it seems like quite a few people liked the characters that were introduced in that chapter. Yes, May, I know she's a witch, but she's also a new character. And I'm just bringing up another discussion point where people are kind of iffy on new characters at this point. So I just think it's interesting what you kind of brought up there. Guy Gear says they felt this chapter was incredibly cohesive. A major theme and motif of change from Elvika to Lakan to Doreen with little fun tidbits and foreshadowing of important events. Drum trolls, hag magic, new mage school location, witch landovers, vampires, pawn, and Leonette friendship, all while having an excellent trail of major changes being made. Building into Aaron's change, Leonette's change, smaller characters true, but a wonderful dive into the future of the Knights of Solstice as well. That's a great point. I think there's a lot of movement forward across different plot lines, even if they're just like little mentions, especially like the growing network of Windstrom, right, with those carriages. The challenge to the Runners Guild, where they're basically losing business because, first they were afraid of Aaron, but then it's the Windstrom that's coming in and basically eating up all of their potential money-making runs. So we've got lots of little plot points moving forward. And so I like the kind of rounded viewpoints that we're getting with this chapter and how it kind of played out. Fabian says they enjoy the chapter, genuinely love the image of Doreen sitting in the inn with the bear. Bleach Hill says, Elvika, Witch of Change or Witch of Travel as classes. All right. So, Rhythm and Bruise, why don't you wrap us up, and then we're going to move to the first discussion question.
All right. So first, I want to remind you that Wistrom does not have an N in the in its name. It's Wistrom. Secondly, I was very fond of Doreen in this. Doreen has been my my favorite, not my favorite character in the whole series, but one of my favorite characters who doesn't get a lot of mention because she just kind of plugs along and is just a good person, and she doesn't always necessarily make the best decisions or know what to do, but she tries really hard. And so I present to you, this is, my theory of what I hope that some of the River Farm people might say. Doreen, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't break my man. Doreen, 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 please don't break him just because you can. Your power is beyond compare, with muscles bulging out to there and hard gray skin the likes I've never seen. Your arm is like a broken tree, oaken tree. Your shield could not be held by three, and I could barely hinder you, Doreen. He wishes he could take it back. He's sorry that he gave you flack. He knows that you're the best of us, Doreen. And I could easily understand how you would want to break my man, but he'll be better now, I swear, Doreen. Doreen, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't break my man. Doreen, 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 please don't break him just because you can. You could do just as you please, you eat the stars, you drink the seas, and I would get down on my knees, Doreen. What happens next is up to you. No one can tell you what to do. Believe that what I say is true, Doreen. Doreen, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't break my man. Doreen, 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 please don't break him just because you can. So, that is the apology that I wish the River Farmers would give to Doreen after, having this chapter.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I love it. That was amazing. When did you come up with that?
During the stream.
Oh, that I love it. I love it when you come up with songs, especially about the most recent chapters. Thank you so much for sharing. That is a fantastic way to end general impressions, and I think quite a few listeners agree with you. And how Doreen is due some apologies for sure. But yeah, so give a big accolade to Descanter for sharing that, otherwise known as Rhythm and Bruise. We're going to jump into our first discussion question, which let's see. Let's start with the witches. So some theorizing here. What will Elvika, Lakan, and the rest of the witches find out about the magics of the Hag Queens, and how will it affect the witches' magic? So we've got lots of different types of magic running around. The witches in particular are a brand that I think everyone is quite interested in, because it is quite different from what we see with some of our adventures, like Pisces, the Digin, what's going on at Windstrom. I know you called me out on that, to Scantor, but I'm gonna just continue. I see an excited reaction from May. May, if you have some thoughts about the witches, would love to hear them. See, several people have some theories. Dark Time Guai says that we'll finally find the legendary sandwich. I mean, Bellavere is currently under the ocean. I think last we checked in with her, we don't really know what she's doing down there. She's on some sort of punishment from the dead witches, the witches in the Deadlands. So maybe that will be her new class. We're gonna ditch the whole spider of webs shtick, and we're gonna go straight into sand and tides. I think that's a good class upgrade for her. Bleach Soul, your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually I'm very interested to see the different magic from different worlds, because it's not the first time we see different magic from different world, but it's quite interesting how it will be applicable and to the witches and the in world, and how much it will change River Farm, and if it will change like classes into I don't know, universal stuff or whatever. But I think it will be quite interesting to see how much information they will get from the book and the body of these hags. Uh, Maybe they, I don't know, maybe they can unlock some old magics, which with regards to languages, that it was, it's weird that everybody speak one language. Maybe they unlock some kind of secret with that. So it will be quite fascinating and interesting for me to see. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Redding Quill says magical language of Adenvun. Do you want to clarify that a bit more?
Yeah,
Redding
like
Quill?
I forget exactly what the hag queens were from. Like I think it was Aiden Vine or whatever. But like I think it will be like the language will be incorporated into the system, because what's really limiting language is whether the grand design incorporates it into uh, the system of everything. So I think Aklat yeah, like Mystical Pie said. So like I think that maybe when they uncover this language, it'll be incorporated into skills and everything. It'll the reason you chant it is because it's an empowering of magic. So that's it.
All right, I think those are some good points, right? The more the system knows, the more it grows, the more it can apply across different classes and skill types. And so if it's able to kind of get its hands on that, yeah, we could see the witches going from like a waning class to disappearing maybe in the near future to something that is starting to, explode and take on new ways and forms, outside of the one that the Bella's daughter is doing with the whole judgment and justice thing. Waimei says, Alvika taking care of the two little witchlings is hella cute. They definitely need to get together with Gothica for some shenanigans. They are apprentices currently, might as well study under Gothica for a while. Alvika having a softer side to her was nice to see, and how the witches are becoming a mainstay of River Farm is great. Alvika's interactions with Lakan in regard to the language were fun to read, and I hope, or they hope, we will get more of that. No opinion yet on the Hag Queens. Great points. I would love to see some more Gothica, and her, partnering up with the witchlings and terrifying Iskar, his sister, in new and exciting ways would be fantastic. I think people are a little leery of visiting the inn, maybe rightly so, but hopefully Lakan's reluctance rather to kind of pursue that connection further doesn't cross over to the witches, even though I think the witches also have some grief or some beef with Aaron, some accounting that needs to be settled, so to speak. Because I do wish to, see those reactions and connections, because I think that would be adorable. Fabian says they have a feeling that translating the language may be quite dangerous, as well as providing opportunities for witches to have become more powerful. Dark Time Guai says the Hag Queen magic combines with River Farm's 3 times a day ritual to unlock the Shag Queen. Well, unless some more relationships develop there, I think that's not necessarily a an avenue they're going to continue to explore. Geiger says they're really curious if there will be a Tower of Babel situation where the unified language allows the gods an opportunity to take it down and disunify the world. That's actually a really great point. One of the main things in the Wandering In world is that everybody's united by one language. They might have different phrasings or dialects, or they might have different writing in some cases, but the one thing is, no matter where you go, you speak the same language, barring Drath, I believe, or goblins. So for that to be struck, or for that to not be a commonality between everyone anymore, that would be a huge win potentially for the dead gods. I am curious to see if Pirate's going to go that way. That's a very good theory. Mr. Europe says translate scrolls go brr. Yeah, there would need to be some serious development of that kind of magic for it to work effectively. Unless anyone has some other thoughts, we will move on to the next discussion question. We chatted a little bit about this during general impressions, but I'm interested to see if there was just anything else that people wanted to chat about in regards to this topic. So maybe a multi-part question. Let's see. So what was it about this chapter that made it that it was a long chapter? Did it actually feel short? Was that something that just kind of did it feel short to you? Did it feel long? Did you guys have any other things to say on that? And then, getting at this like sort of structuring and layout. One thing that I think a few people noticed was that there seemed to be more creative descriptive language. How did you guys feel about this chapter? Right, in the author's note at the end, Pirate said that they felt like they were kind of getting back into their old writing style. And I think this was referring to maybe some of the descriptive language that we kind of see with like the Fae and the witches in particular, almost that like Shakespearean kind of style of language. And I think we were starting to see some of that when we were discussing with the witches. So just interested to see what your all's thoughts were about these kind of structural elements. Bleach Soul says that it felt really long. Okay. Ready Quill, what were your thoughts?
So part of the reason I felt like it was short was because it flowed so well from one thing to the next that like I felt like even though it was covering a lot of topics, I wasn't even getting enough because it was so good. Like it's kind of like when you're eating a bag of chips and like you're like, oh, it's not even filling me up, but you ate the whole bag. That's what this chapter felt like to me. It was right up my alley. I loved it. Someone earlier was talking about how the theme of this chapter was change, and I think they really struck the nail on the head. They're totally right about that. It had a theme that was very cohesive and interesting. I thought, oh, this really long chapter was short because I wanted more. Maybe that's really the main reason. I recognize that not everyone feels this way. Maybe they thought the love relationship dragged on too long, or it had too many different perspectives. But I had no problems with that. It was really fine for me. Yeah.
I think that's really cool to hear. And the fact that like some people are focusing in on the specific characters as like how they kind of feel like a scene kind of comes together and is unified, versus more looking for themes or motifs. And that's the unifier. That's why we do these discussions. And it's just really interesting to see these different perspectives. Because for me, I was focused a little bit more on the characters, but now that people kind of bring up the themes and motifs, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of makes you take a step back and think about the character or the chapter in a different light. So thank you for sharing that. Mr. Europe.
Yeah, as other people have said, I think it flowed very well. I also think that there wasn't like a big event, kind of like there were important conversations and like important stuff like that, but there wasn't a huge thing in the chapter. Like there was a little rock fight which petered out and like just couple of important conversations and stuff. Personally, just to clarify, I really like that fact about the chapter. Like these it wasn't even like a big realization or big like that. It was just very I guess slice of lifey is the word, or the description. That it just felt like a long, normal uh process of them going through, of Doreen going through this, of like them thinking about their problems and like methodically going through the hag witches stuff and just experiencing their lives. I really enjoyed that fact about the chapter and really liked how it flowed and how it went uh between the characters and like in their little situations that were going along, slowly realizing things about themselves and each other, and just I just felt it was a very enjoyable reading reading process that I looked up at the end and thought, oh, where'd the whole chapter go?
Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think one of the strengths of The Wandering Inn is that we do get all these little details about the characters. And that's what makes these characters so complicated and, just complex, where you get to see their introspective thoughts, you get to see how people react to them, you get to see what they're doing. And that's what makes characters, so hated or loved, or, we weep when they die. God, mentioning Vaught me in tears again this chapter. Uh, that's kind of a true strength, but I can also understand when people react and say, do we need every little detail just to kind of keep the pace moving? And so for you, it sounds like you loved every moment of this chapter. But I am interested to see if people felt like there were scenes that maybe could have been cut or to help with the flow, or if everyone said, yeah, flow was fantastic, needed every little scene, to kind of get the overall message and tone of the chapter. I don't have an opinion one way or another. I'm just interested to see what other people say. Did you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Europe, or we'll continue on to Yash Ketchum?
We can continue.
Okay, Yash, you're up.
Hi. So I just joined and I missed most of the discussion because I was finishing the chapter. And I think that's an indication of how it was rather long. To me personally, it felt, it flowed really well, but that didn't stop me from feeling the length because I kept falling asleep in the middle. So then, like, I couldn't finish it on time for the discussion.
Oh no,
But
I'm sorry. Oh, which were you just tired, or was just you were trying to read it while you were also awake at an early hour or late hour?
yeah, like I started reading it when it came out last night. And
Oh,
then I
yeah.
fell asleep. Then I got up and I was like, oh shit, I fell asleep before finishing it. And then I read this morning. I started reading and then I fell asleep again.
Oh no,
And yeah, like, and I was like, oh God, I don't have time.
were you just dreaming the wandering in all day? You're just waking and sleeping in the world.
Yeah. Oh God, I wouldn't be surprised if I got like levels popping up into my head at that point. Like, but it flowed beautifully. Like, I felt like usually how Pirate writes, it's like short sentences and very to the point, especially sentences that really hit, you know. One of Pirate's favorite things to say is because that matters. And, I didn't see much of that, but it was implied, like how Durine's feelings were important because they mattered. But then we didn't need to be told explicitly, like, yes, they matter. No, we were made to feel it through the descriptiveness and through the description and through the reactions of other people. So that was really beautiful. And but then personally, I don't read Wandering In for romance. So when I read romance and Wandering In, I get a little thrown off. Is it exciting? Yes, but like that's personally not I read it for. So it was a bit of it was a bit of an adventure, but then I did fall asleep. So Like there we go. But then it might just have been like a Lakan thing because it was interesting to come back to Lakan. Uh, but in general, I feel like the Emperor chapters are very long. I don't know if you get the feeling, but I feel like because it's not a
Mhm.
story, it's not a story that we get often, right? So I feel like I put more effort into reading everything. And
100% agree. Like, we don't
yeah,
see them often, so everything has to come out basically in one fell swoop. 100% agree on that.
exactly. So it's not something where, okay, if I miss this paragraph or if I forget this paragraph, I'll catch up on it later. No, I have to read it. But then I think there were some points where I found myself skipping some of, oh God, this is sacrilege, yes. But I think during the fight scenes and stuff, I did. Usually those are the interesting ones, right? But I didn't find them very interesting because it was such a dead end impossible situation. I was like, no, it was set up from the very start that, if there is a genius solution, it had to either come soon because the fight was not helping.
So you think it was more the plot premise than the phrasing for those particular scenes that kind of led you to maybe skimming a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Like I felt like the flowiness of the language didn't fit the tone of the fight scenes, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because fight scenes, the so when I read, I visualize, right?
Mhm.
And when I'm visualizing fight scenes, it's the way we're shown in movies,
Mhm.
snap, like a lot of cuts, a lot of edits, quick scenes, long fight scenes, we very rarely get to see. So they're very difficult to visualize. And the long descriptive ways that the fight scenes and all were described, I sort of zoned out because I wasn't able to visualize it or imagine it. Like the movie was not running in my head anymore because I didn't have
I
the
think
tools to visualize them.
I think that's interesting because, like, there's so many fight scenes in The Wandering Inn, right? You can't describe them the same way every. I mean, you could, but you don't want to describe them the same way every time because it then people just it becomes too repetitive.
Repetitive, yeah.
So maybe this was Pirate experimenting a little bit, or maybe they were just kind of writing in one way and that carried over to the fight scenes. But it's interesting that you mentioned that. I think it's George R. R. Martin or George R. R. Martin who is sort of quoted quite a bit for he writes so many fight scenes, he has to think about different ways to write them each time. Otherwise, they just become the same thing over and over again. So maybe this was Pirate experimenting, which I'm, always down for. It's
Yeah.
interesting to see that it didn't quite maybe hit the mark with you. Maybe it hit the mark for others. I am not the
Yeah,
biggest
like
fan
it's
of fight
very
scenes,
subjective because
but
the
yeah,
way two people imagine things is not going to be the same, right? And my way of visualization may not translate into pirates writing, but I'm sure like it worked for a lot of other people. So,
well, it depends, right? Like, so for some fight scenes, they're perfect. They work for
yeah,
you, and in other cases, they don't. So it's interesting, I think, to see the experimentation.
yeah. Like, but I do wish we got more of how like post change. Like, I wish more. I know like Pirate wants to save it for other chapters, but the build up to okay, so I'll compare it to maybe Lynette's chapters. We knew what was coming, right, with Lynette. Like we knew the final decision she was going to make. And there was a lot of build up to it. But that build up was really fun and really interesting. So it didn't feel very tiring. Now here, given that we are getting an Emperor chapter, we knew that we are seeing something happen. We knew that a change was coming. We couldn't predict what that change was going to be. But But then I couldn't wait to get to the change fast enough. Maybe because, again, like the chapters are so limited that I was very, I could not invest so much time in the background of things because I was like, each chapters are fewer in number. I want the plot to progress faster. So
I
maybe
think
that
that's a
that's what is happening here.
I think that's a fair statement. And when you have all this build up and you don't maybe see the stopping point, like a conclusion of some sort, like you said with the Leonette chapter, where we had all this build up, we got our skill class, we got a conclusion to that arc within the chapter or within a couple chapters. Whereas with Lakin, I'd expect that we're not coming back to this for a while. And
Yeah,
so if you don't get that somewhat of a stopping point, right? Somewhat of a conclusion, it can be kind of like, wait, no, we can't move forward. You need maybe sort of a
Yeah,
built-in
because
stopping
now
point a little bit more.
we don't know when we're getting a Lakan chapter again.
Right.
So
I think I agree with that. That makes sense.
yeah, like, but overall, it was a very fun chapter. The romance part, the breakup part. I mean, as somebody who's been broken up with and who has done the breaking up, like it was almost, it felt relatable, but almost too relatable, where it also sort of takes you back. So, yeah,
Oh, I was cringing. I was like, no, this is too real. This is too relatable.
yeah, it
No,
was,
pirate,
it was
why?
too relatable. And like but yeah, and but Pawn's reaction was so wholesome. I'm glad we got some sort of uh, forward movement in this aspect from Pawn. Like that was just beautiful. Like I was
100%
very happy
agree.
with that. Yeah. But overall,
100%
the
agree.
writing style, I like it. Again, it felt like Mr. Europe said. It was very slice of lifey, very what you would expect from a story like Wandering In. Had we seen this style of writing when Wandering In was still focusing purely on slice of life stories, that would have, like, it was a little reminiscent of that. Like, if not exactly that, because the writing style then was different, but
Mhm.
it would have fit right in, like it made a not slices of life story slice of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think readers have been after to get back to that for a bit because that was what a lot of people started with was this slice of life. Really kind of got sucked into that, and to kind of come back to that with this chapter, was exciting and refreshing. And not to say that other recent chapters haven't been absolutely loved and adored. I like the change up of the style, and I think, like you said earlier, maybe just for this, there's so many good scenes and sections of this chapter, and I love the descriptive language. It makes scenes
Yeah,
come alive for me. It helps me visualize the characters. It helps me visualize the settings. And like you said earlier, there was a lot of showing, not a lot of telling, not being like, she's upset. But like I was
yeah,
able to pick up on the feelings, and I'm so happy to see that because I know that's something that has been developing, just looking and reading over the years. And so I
yeah,
love that we're moving more into that. And maybe just for this chapter to
exactly.
land just a little bit of the leveling, because that's what everyone gets excited about, right? Everyone wants to see the levels of the classes, and we just want to know.
Yeah, like it was really nice. And my favorite part of the whole chapter was when, like, Doreen refused her lady class
Yep.
because, again, like that was the real slice of life moment for me. That was when, we saw Doreen truly come into herself and truly become a person. That was a good ending for Doreen. Like, I felt like Doreen got a
Oh, it's
completion.
perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We just
like,
need
if you
Alvika and Lakin.
exactly, like if you go for like slice of life stories, right? Like how do they work? It's a small premise, it's a small contrivance which usually gets resolved by the end of that one shot or the end of the story. And we got that for Doreen, but the empire, the unseen empire is not slice of life. So the
Mm.
writing style didn't translate for the unseen empire, but it worked beautifully for Doreen.
Mm. Well, maybe we'll get another chapter. Maybe this isn't, an interlude so much as like a two-parter, and we'll continue with the Unseen Empire and the Witches for a little bit more.
Yeah.
And before we switch over to like the Newlands or Goblins or something. All
Yeah,
right.
that would be fine. Yeah.
So we're gonna move to the next person. But thank you for those thoughts. Mystical Pie says that there were parts of the chapter that flowed well, but it definitely felt long. As they mentioned earlier, the Order of the Solstice section with the elementals specifically felt like it dragged on for them. They agree, however, with Yash that basically none of the action in this chapter really hit for them. All right. Samu, you're up.
Yeah, I think I agree as well that the action scenes wasn't really they weren't hitting the same as other very big action scenes we've seen, and especially the end of volume 9, or basically from the mid on to end of volume 9. There's been a lot of big action scenes, but I think that is the biggest contrast, that this chapter is not about the external threats anymore. End of volume 9, we've seen a lot of, or even starting in the mid of it with the the inception of the Order of Solstice versus the Arksinger adventurers, the Bloodfeast raiders, and the end of Volume 9. Everything has been about external threats. And I think what this chapter really, and I think rightly in that slice of life style, really showed was that there was also inner change, basically from the characters themselves. We see all of the like Lakan make a decision not just because of pure desperation, but because he has the option to to choose something, and the same with Doreen coming into herself and breaking up with Lakan. And I'd say a little less so, but also with the witch arc with Alavika, who's taking over for her mentor and taking care of them. It's like a lot of inner change that's not really about overcoming an external threat. And I think that has been that, like, the more bumbling slice of lifestyle of the chapter really has, like, really showed that. And I think that's why it was great, because it was such a contrast to all those god level threats in Volume 9 that they had to fight against.
Those are great points. And it's a nice change of pace in how we're bouncing around like high level characters to more low level, more specific like problems to them rather than these gigantic I think now that you mentioned that, this chapter did a really good job of interweaving between larger plot points and smaller, more personal issues to characters, right? We got to see we're still seeing, but we're getting to see the aftermath of everything that happened at the inn with Casigna, and how it's affecting, right, everybody in the aftermath, both small and large characters, right? For those who died, for those who lived, and how they're proceeding onward or they're not. And so you brought that up, and I really actually appreciate that insight. Thank you. Mafia Hamster says Aaron has a poop emoji with a crown for Laken's River Farm, and now the order is also like, fuck him. Is there anyone outside his kingdom who really likes him? Haha. Ooh, and a couple thumbs up there. Laken is not a popular character, I would say, with the readers. I don't know too many who like him to read. I think people like Doreen, didn't necessarily like Laken, which is a shame because Laken has two really cool pets. He's an emperor doing really interesting things. And yet he's just not a very well liked character, and yet the townspeople love him, right? They adore him. I don't know. It's an interesting dichotomy, or it's an interesting mismatch for Laken, because I think he's an interesting character to read, but he's just never a popular one. Let's circle back to Bleach Soul. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. The reason I thought it was long, it was because the changing perspectives. It's also like it's always like I don't know. I like the chapters that focus on one perspective at a time. If that makes any sense, because
it does.
If it focuses on many things, it feels like a bit I don't know, unfocused, or even though it made totally sense that everybody in this character in the chapter who mentioned like should be in the chapter, but just felt like not streamlined to me, at least. With the cave thing, and that's it. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing your insights. Really appreciate your take. All right, Rhythm and Bruise, you're up.
All right, so I didn't think the chapter felt overly long to me, but then I can read a lot of words really fast, and so it doesn't always so I can recognize that in terms of number of words, it's large. I thought the writing style it did kind of harken back a little bit to earlier when the narrator was either more inside the point of view characters' heads directly, and less describing things, or alternately that the narrator had an opinion about things. Like, back in earlier on, sometimes, when Horns were exploring the first crypt and things, it felt like the narrator had an opinion about what was going on a little more. And so that's kind of what it felt like in a ways, I think. But to the original question here of if you were going to cut things, where would you cut? I would say the elemental fighting, not the whole thing. I wouldn't cut the whole thing. I could actually visualize what was happening there. It took a long time in terms of word count to not go anywhere. And I get some talking about how it's a little bit of the reader can feel the banging the head against the wall as well as the characters, but there's kind of a line there where it's not pleasant to feel like you're beating your head against a wall. And like I said, it felt like that could have been shorter and gotten the point across, and gotten the point and the feeling across of what was going on there. So, and also I thought kind of the opening took kind of a long time. I don't often say that about the arts openings, but a lot of the opening, I kind of see where they were going with, and getting a lot of the reactions to death and change and so on for a lot of the Empire. But for some reason, that felt like it took longer than it absolutely needed to. I didn't not enjoy it, but if you are looking for ways to trim the chapter down in length, that's another place that I would have looked. I think that Lakan's strong POVs and Doreen's and Alevika's were all, and the Order of the Solstice, when they got past the elementals and started doing other things, all of those were really integral and needed to be that long to give themselves the space to do the stuff they needed to do.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, I liked kind of the longer descriptive openings, but I can definitely sort of see that point where maybe they could have been shortened a little bit. But
Yeah.
Pirate kind of plays with openers, right? Like sometimes we're in the middle of action, sometimes we get more of a like, this is the world, and we're going to narrow in to this very specific half-elf forest in about 3 pages. And
I was going to say, so I'm not trying to say that I would have liked the chapter more if the opening had been cut. I'm saying that if you want to make it shorter, that's a place that you could do it. I think I'm saying more than I think that it was badly done and absolutely should be shorter, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that like the chapter would have been stronger without those scenes, but if you're just looking for straight things to cut, that would be maybe a place to look.
Yeah, if you feel that the chapter is too long, as an author, if Pirate as an author felt like the chapter was too long from feedback or from what they thought, then that's a place that I would look in this chapter to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to be careful with cutting though, because like sometimes things just need to be long, right? Like, and a lot of people have said this chapter could have been longer as well. So, it's hit or miss. It's really up to the author. But it's interesting to kind of see like what resonates with people and what maybe doesn't quite hit the mark as much. So, thanks for sharing those thoughts. All right, so we'll read out some responses from people, and then we'll get to the last set of questions. Red Ink Quill says this was a non-serious action scene. This is in reference, by the way, to the fight scene with Doreen and the Order of the Solstice. Red Ink Quill says it wasn't meant to hit hard. They thought the confrontation with the hunters went hard, though. It was also a metaphor for banging your head against a wall for no reward, and the good thing is to just stop and leave. So kind of to your point that you were saying, Descantor. Yash Ketchum says in response, that's the point. It's not meant to hit, so maybe so much description wasn't required. Waimei says to add on to what has been said already, to them, it feels like the Order is taking over the horns. Part of going out, doing things adventurers would usually be hired for. They're completely missing the night aspect. It felt like we are watching a squad of new adventurers exploring a cave to set up the trolls plotline, and not what a Night Order would do, at least to them. The writing style kind of reflected the lower stakes the earlier volumes had, to be honest. Yash Ketchum says they feel like Lakan should be, in all respects, a Disney character, but somehow doesn't land. Reddit Quill says people still have PTSD from World War I with Germans using gas to kill. That's why people hate Lakan. That's especially how Lakan handled the goblins, and people could call them on it, right? And him being from Germany, that's probably a big reason as to why he's pretty much a miss sometimes with readers. Moppy Hamster, however, thinks that Lakan is unpopular because he comes across a bit of an arrogant prick. For his charming arrogance, like Floss. This is me reacting to Floss, but I'll keep my opinions to myself. Anyway, Moppy Hamster says there's a charming arrogance to like Floss has, and that's what Lakan is doing. And some people agree, with hearts and Mishra pointing up. Nobody says people liked him quite a lot till he opposed a far more popular character in Rags. You can see it in the reaction to Volume 5 Lakan Red Chapters in Reading Room if you want. So it's a good point. We have to kind of remember that people's reactions differed over time, and sometimes it can be hard to think back to those earlier volumes that seem like so long ago at this point. Fabian says Lakan isn't well liked because he's not likable. It's unbelievably arrogant of him to think that he can make a world he knows very little about a better place by accruing as much power into his arrogant self as he can. It's interesting that you say that, because if you got the reference to the character that Aaron met last chapter, which I did not because I've never read the book, but people explained it to me. If you got that reference to that character, I think what you're saying, Fabian, is going to hit incredibly home with that character. And I will be very interested to circle back to that and compare that character to Lakan. I'm going to put a pin in that and make sure to bring it up at the next discussion when we finally get another Aaron chapter. Nobody says his boo, more words, not less. Fair enough. Dark Time Guai says they guess some people consider him a wet blanket, and Bleachel says they love that Fedorhep is seen as the wise king who almost always has sage advice. So some Fedorhep love in there for you guys. All right. Last set of questions. Since we're about almost an hour in, this is a threesome, if you will, or a trio? Probably the wrong terminology there, but a group of three. How will the new changes affect the Unseen Empire? Do you see River Farm becoming a safe haven for vampires? What will the fallout of the I know it's not D'Artagnan, but that's what I want to say. Dardian Beer's hunt be? How do you see Lakan's relationship with Yidden changing? What will Avika's new class and craft be? What will Malvika's new class be? So all of these questions that I think we were all hoping to see answered by the end of the chapter, but now we're like, what's going to happen? What are your theories? What are your guesses? Where do you think this is going? Would love to open to discussion, to speculation, and hopes and dreams and wishes. Or what don't you want to see? What don't you want to happen with these characters? What are your fears, your agonies, you're terrified to see happen? Yash Ketchum, you're up first.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, Mavika's classes were just fantastic. Like, she's been given a little more power, and I think one of the biggest issues that she had was the loss of old ways, and I think having that kind of power is going to enable her to bring back, or at least bring a sense of the old ways again. The old ways may not necessarily be good, but in a way they do deserve to be preserved, if only in people's memories, if not in practice, then in people's memories, right? So, well, I'm excited for that, clearly. Vampires, hell yeah, vampires are going to be a part of the Unseen Empire. Like, I think eventually Lakan is going to take a stand. His biggest gripe right now is that he's not powerful enough to take a stand. And if people decide to attack his people because of this whole vampire issue, his whole issue is that people are going to get upset. He doesn't have an army, and taking a stand for the vampires is inevitably going to put his people in danger, right? So it's very understanding where he's coming from, but he also knows that the sins of the father and all, it cannot be passed down. So you cannot hold people today accountable for what people could have done in the past. It's the same thing with the goblins, right? And if Lakin can come to an understanding about the goblins, it's not that big of a leap for him to have the same reaction with vampires. So yeah, I do see him becoming a haven for vampires, and inadvertently that might solve his army problem, because vampires will be then at least the more okay. So basically, I saw there was this one podcast that I saw recently with an army soldier who was working in Kashmir, and there was this guy who was fighting back because that's what he'd been taught. If you want to protect your people, you have to fight. But his fighting had no purpose. So the army guy, instead of killing him, actually said, "Why don't you apply to the army? Why don't you join the army? Why don't you fight for, the nation? Why don't you fight for the country?" And I think that choice, when given to people who've been backed into a corner to be able to fight and protect themselves, also giving them power in the system itself, I think that's really empowering. I think we might see something like that happen here, where Lakin will give them a choice to join the army, protect themselves and the empire itself, because the empire is protecting them. So it has to be a mutual sort of a relationship. So I think that might happen. I think that works really well with the kind of skills and the kind of theme that a very mystical sort of, with the witches and the blindness and all of that, very mystical sort of theme that's going on with the empire at the moment. I think that'll work really well. Yeah. And Mavika, oh my God, I want to see more scarecrows. I want to see scarecrow elementals, farm elementals. Like, can you imagine elementals made of hay and
You
like
want to
corn
see
husks?
golems. You want to see hay golems, which are just stitch people with hay. No?
No, no. I see.
No?
If they, because golems, I feel bad because golems have personality. Like, or golems, like, then I'll start thinking of Cognita, right? Because she is sentient, but she doesn't have personhood, which is very sad, and then I'll get very sad. But elementals are very arbitrary. They're like automatons, but magically powered. I don't know.
Pirate's gonna sense that and gonna go into a whole foray of personality with the elementals.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's such a complicated thing with personhood here, because like if it's just humans, it's very easy to define personhood. But now it's all complicated, and it makes me very now the river is also a person. Why didn't Laken give the river his own domain so he can chill?
Yeah, well, they tried that, and the river almost washed them away. So,
Exactly.
but
Like you have to do like a cost benefit analysis on this.
but you bring up a good point, though. I mean, a lot of the things that one of the major first questions, themes, whatever of this whole story was personhood, right? What is it to be a person? Who deserves that right? Is it supposed to be a right? Should you treat everything with respect and assume that it has some sort of sentience? I mean, that's what Aaron did with the goblins and the ants, and that's what Lakin is almost
Yeah.
being kind of forced to do with goblins and the witches, and maybe now the vampires. And I think you bring up an interesting point, because what Aaron's trying to achieve, right, this equality, this justice for the goblins and the ants, she's an innkeeper. I mean, that might change, whatever, but at the end of the day, she's an innkeeper and a witch. The person
Yeah.
that's positioned to affect potentially real change is Lakin. He has a building, he's a blue or an empire. If people come to his empire, he can be like, these are citizens, these are people, you will treat them as such. He's in a position to do that.
And I think he did that in a way with goblins in this chapter that was marvelous, because by taking taxes from them, by taking teeth from them, by acknowledging their own internal hierarchy, he has inadvertently given them personhood. Because before it could be argued that they were just a pet project. or they were an experiment, kept in the backyard but not allowed to have all the rights or not be recognized in a way that a kingdom would recognize its other people. But now they're paying taxes, they contribute. So now they are, for all legal purposes, people, right?
100%
So,
agree. And I know Lake and Aaron don't really get along. Right? Aaron has outright said she doesn't like him, but he's
yeah,
doing what she wants to do in a way. And
true.
I'm really interested to see. I mean, Lincoln is not by no means a perfect character. He's the whole thing with the
He
dead
has a lot of
gods and
issues.
whatever, a lot of
Yeah.
issues. But I feel like he's more like Aaron than
Not.
we, yeah, than maybe we kind of realize sometimes. And I'm
And
interested to see a
Erin,
showdown between them. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and Erin sort of says it herself, right? If she met somebody just like her, she wouldn't like them.
Oh, that's an excellent
And
point.
yeah, like, so maybe that's why she doesn't like Lakan as much. Of course, he's an ass, but he's an ass in a way that every person is an ass. Even Erin is an ass. If we look at her from Tyrion's perspective, who was just trying to protect his own people, protect his own children, and then you have Erin, who is, for all intents and purposes, siding with the people who are siding with the, in his eyes, things that want to kill his people and do raids and harm and rape and all of that, isn't even Tyrion, from his own point of view, justified.
And that's what makes
So,
reading the story complicated because you end up hating characters and then Pirate pulls a roundabout like, oh, sympathy.
yeah. So, yeah,
uh,
I think personhood themes with Laken are going to be explored a lot. Really.
I always just think back to what Erin described as the kind of person that she's looking for if she were to ever consider romance.
Don't
And
even go there. Don't you dare even go there.
ignoring uninvited opinions, Lakin is starting to tick some of those boxes and he's
Edge.
newly single.
God.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
But I think we
Anyway,
saw it pretty much be established that Alevica is in the running.
she's in the running. She's in the running. Absolutely. But multiple relationships.
It might
We'll
be
see.
Erin's thing, who knows?
Might be. Might be. Aaron is potentially in the running there. We shall have to see. All right. All right. All right. I've excited some people, I can tell. Let's move on to Reading. Quill, what are your thoughts?
It's just funny how everyone gets excited during groups. It's fantastic. I think that he will accept the vampires, and Yash was right about promoting goblins into full-fledged citizens and is incorporating them into existing human hierarchies. It was really interesting. With regards to Alavica's new class and craft, she filled up her hat when um, Lakan was scheming for change and through anger. So it's still with her being getting people from anger, but it's like stewing for change, positive change. Maybe I wasn't really sure what exactly was filling it up. I'm just maybe guessing it was like scheming for change or something like that. It's no longer spiteful hate. It's something more meaningful and fulfilling. Mavica's new class probably becoming like some Margrave witch. And with regards to the farm golem, I think it's more like a farm elemental because Traffy, the law elemental, started fighting it immediately for impinging on its territory. So I think it's a farm elemental. Um, but yeah, I really liked how the new changes at the end. I was kind of hoping for maybe seeing what class consolidations would have come from that. Maybe just to like finish it off and put a pin in it so that we can come back to it later. But that's my only note for the chapter. I really liked it.
Thanks for sharing. I think all of that is great, and it's always great to see people's different reactions to discuss lively discussion.
Lively discussions indeed.
Some reactions. Dart Time Guai says, still hoping for Bear on Bismarck. Missed opportunity there. I would absolutely agree. Fabian says they think the Unseen Empire will attempt to be a safe haven for vampires, but may end up putting them in more danger by offering them a safe haven and then concentrating many of them in a single location where they can be easily more targeted. For instance, the buyers will know exactly whose water supply could use an extra helping of silver dust. Fair point. If they were to treat that as a safe haven, they would probably still need to kind of not protect or hide themselves in kind of the fact that they are vampires, if at all possible. Start Time Guai says Lakan should get a tin elemental and import some lions from Kaz. Mafia Hamster says, good for me, Asteria specifically. An entire race just reduced to straw golems. Haha. Mr. Europe says, every person is an ass, according to Yosh. A summary of River Farm. I mean, at the same time, every character is complicated, and I would say that there's a single character in the Wandering Inn that does have some negative points. Jacana and Relt included in that. Every character is complex. Nobody is entirely good or bad. There is. Purik is awful, and basically any of the slavers are bad. But and I'm sure there's other people I'm forgetting in there, but most characters are complicated. Nobody's entirely good, that's for sure. Or at least perfect, well-liked, happy-go-lucky person. Radiant Quill says, but the water elemental can clean the water. And Fabian says, maybe. Good points. So let's circle back to Mr. Europe, I believe.
Yeah, these are all like interesting different questions. I don't think the vampires will stay at River Farm because everyone with some sense who's able to seems to be running to Drakelands. But I do kind of want the vampires to stay at River Farm because I want an ultimate River Farm champion to come, and it would be a lamb that's been trained by the goblins, gets a witch's hat, and is now a vampire as well. So I do want the vampires to go there, but I don't think it will happen. The whole hunt thing is obviously getting worse and worse, and is very obviously going to tick over into open warfare, probably with D'Artien as the like kind of sorta not completely terrible guy who's being used by the old man Reinhardt, and then hopefully he dies anyway because he's a real piece of shit. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the all the witch stuff with Alevica and Mavica and everyone, because it's been a plot point since Volume 6 that the witches are falling apart, kind of getting weaker as the world modernizes slightly or changes over the millennia. And about how they will survive in the future. We have Wiskaria's law craft. Now we have the hag, whatever the hell they're doing with that, and we have Mavica's noble witches. And I think it's just it's just putting more and more pieces on that plot point, and I wonder where it will go. There's a lot of setup, I think, for that story, and it's very hard to figure out what's actually going to happen with that.
Yeah, I there's so many different diverging paths, and it's going to be really, I just want to explore all of them. And I think it's going to be really cool to see. Any other thoughts?
I do wonder what the whole buyer stuff is going to be, because we not only have these buyers, like the main ones, going down a bit of a dark path, slightly understandable, but pretty heinous all the same.
Mhm.
Because their house did get burned down, but at the same time, they've basically been spreading racially selective AIDS across the continent. So fuck them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's especially interesting with Ulaw's coming up with his new understanding of honor and like character development, which is he was already wavering on the whole Byers family legacy, and I think he's going to come up in the middle of the whole Spanish Inquisition phase of this story plot. I think that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, no, I kind of want to stay with this whole group for another chapter just to kind of start to like see how they connect to all these other plot points in Israel. We'll see. We'll have to see how it goes. Mafia Hamster, you pinged Aliased, but I believe you meant me, so you're up.
Wow. First of all, sorry for my comment, but I really couldn't help myself. Now that I can speak, you are mad.
You need to apologize. I know.
You are mad.
I knew I was going to
and
elicit some responses.
I wish Mr. Wiggles were here to put you in your place for that comment alone. But he isn't. But it's okay. That's okay. To the question, what I am most excited about is that, if I understand correctly, part of River Farm is now under the Fae? Or did I read that wrong?
No, they've always had, right? They were appointed lords and ladies
They were paid
way back.
yes.
Yeah, now it's part of the Phalans, I believe.
But now it's part of the. That is what I mostly am excited about, because it could be a way for Iveleth to maybe come back, because when it's technically she is forbidden to go to Inworld when Ryoka is alive, but when River Farm is now part of Fae, or that this place is part of Fae, she is still not in Inworld because it's part of Fae. And that could be a way for Everleth to maybe like visit or come back. And I really thought that at one point she's just showing up there because there was something with a feather and a sacrifice. And I thought at some point that she's gonna come back right now, but no. But yeah, I'm most excited about the Fae now controlling or having a part of River Farm dedicated to Fae. That is huge, I think. And Lakan probably should level from this, because it's again unique stuff that probably never had happened before. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
The Fae connection is a good point. I don't think I don't think that's even been brought up yet, and that's like such a huge like. I would love to see that connection develop as well. I really, I'm going to reiterate it again, would not mind staying with this plot point for another chapter or two, just to continue seeing how things develop, because I think it's really cool. But yeah, no, absolutely. Especially the Phalans, like, and then through the Fae, like that's a gateway, right? Because we know so many different other worlds and whatever visit the Fae lands, and then through that could come to Inworld. Like that's a great point and good catch.
So yeah, this could be a really interesting plot development, and I'm still talked about what you said, but
Well, Red Ink Quill says that I did nothing wrong. So,
yeah. And Mr. Europe also. What's wrong with you people? I'm
a
just
new
speechless.
ship has set sail.
I need Mr. Wiggles.
Well, you'll have to summon him. Fabian says they feel like the changes to River Farm should have been given a little bit more space in the chapter. All right, and then barring any other pings or responses, we will close out with you, Bleach Soul. But if anyone else has any responses, feel free to type them up. I will read them out or I call on you. But for now, the last word currently is with you, Bleach Soul.
Yeah, I think the changes will be like drastic, and yeah, they will start hosting vampires because like the goblins, they are people, and not everybody is responsible. And one group's action does not represent everybody. So yeah, he will start actually hosting vampires, and it will. I think it will be great, drama showdown between him and Itan, and build up on the goblin theme about individuality and personalhood. So yeah, it will be great. So it will be great. At least it will be great development, and maybe it will make the Unseen Empire probably an enemy to one of the 5 families, or probably 2 or 3, or maybe all, because of the witches and the goblins and the vampires. So yeah, I think they will host them. With regards to Alvika new class and craft, I don't know. She will change from spite most definitely, and her class probably will she will change also too. Uh, Probably after like cracking the code of the hags, she will become more powerful. Her class will change probably to something like happier, instead of being like spite and strife and all of that things. Maybe she will get positive energy, or something similar. With regards to Mavica, I don't know. Uh, she's creepy enough for for my taste. So yeah, given her her own domain with scarecrows and stuff, yeah, it's a nightmare, freaking nightmare. That's it.
A nightmare, but nightmares aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? You got to have the good and the bad. You got to have balance. Especially, I'm reminded of the Uliaya part where Alvika was talking about how, right, the curses were super effective, but not everybody wanted to buy one. And the presence of them was more important than the fact that people actually use them. So maybe that's the same case with our diversifying of the empire into the different types or realms, all kind of coming under one banner. May says, people calling Mavika creepy, so much hell, so much hell, so much hell. She's just vibing. Our ardent supporter of our witches coming in to provide some support. There are just so many different amazing plot points that have been kind of set up in this chapter. Super kind of excited to see where they all go. I think Lakan is sort of uniquely set up to connect with a lot of the causes the inn was trying to champion, with the goblins, the witches, the vampires even, right? It seems like a natural connection for him to link up with Leonette as an ally, maybe reaching into the Newlands. He's kind of nicely positioned with the nobles of the north and whatever's going on with the Drakes. So there's lots to be had, I think, with the Empire, and it'll be interesting to see how the Empire develops into maybe a continent-wide power, especially with Magnolia being kind of taken out, right, and having to deal with her insane family. So there's room for the powers to kind of shift in Israel. So interested to see how that develops. A couple other responses as before we wrap up. Brack Giraffe says, Helm having to learn about Fey customs, they feel kind of bad. That would be terrifying. May says, lesson 1, swearing. Morchen says, Norhavia wanting to be worshipped, Lakan actually being worshipped, which just mentioning. Good point, though. Kind of terrifying if Nerhavia decides to swing by. Mr. Europe says, did anyone mention that the mine shaft is definitely a walled city mine? Oh, weird. Dragon-sized mine shaft. Nobody did. Another little plot point that we did not get to. There is oh so much. A couple questions we didn't get to. But before that, Brackdraft says, nah, troll mines. But yeah, so a couple discussion questions we didn't get to, but just food for thought if you're listening, or, as discussion continues later after the recording ends. Will the cave trolls and Doreen meet and talk to each other? How will that affect her? And does her new assertiveness lead her away from River Farm as in only visiting once in a while instead of living there? And then also umbrellas. Now a thing in Liscore? What? So that'll wrap us up for our discussion of chapter 10.19e. Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. And hopefully see you next time if you weren't able to make it. And have fun reading the chapter if you are listening before you've actually read it.